December 1944, Belgium. A German 88mm anti-tank gun crew has a perfect shot. An American Sherman tank, 800 meters away, moving slowly through the snow. The crew has destroyed dozens of Shermans. They know exactly where to aim. The gunner centers the crosshairs on the tank's front glacis, the weakest point. He fires. The shell hits dead center and bounces off. The German crew stares in disbelief. The Sherman keeps coming. They fire again. Another hit. Another bounce. The tank doesn't even slow down. The gun commander realizes with horror that they're facing something new, something their legendary 88 cannot kill. They abandon the gun and run. What they had just encountered was the M4A3E2 Sherman Jumbo, a tank with 7 inches of frontal armor that turned the most feared gun in the German arsenal into an expensive noisemaker. This is the story of how American engineers created a monster that terrified German gun crews and changed armored warfare in the final months of World War II. To understand the terror the Jumbo inspired, you must first understand the legend of the German 88. In North Africa, Russia, Italy, France, the 88 had earned a reputation for destroying any Allied tank at ranges exceeding 2 kilometers. The 8.8-centimeter flak gun, originally designed as anti-aircraft artillery, became the most feared anti-tank weapon of World War II. British Matildas, Soviet T-34s, American Shermans, none could withstand a direct hit from an 88. German gun crews operated with confidence bordering on arrogance. Point the 88 at a tank, pull the trigger, watch it burn. For 3 years, this formula worked perfectly. The standard M4 Sherman tank had roughly 3 inches of frontal armor sloped at 56 degrees. Against German Panzer IVs and early Panthers, this was adequate. Against the 88, it was tissue paper. American tankers knew this. They called Shermans Ronsons, after the cigarette lighter, because they lit on fire so easily. Others called them Tommy cookers or death traps. Crew survival rates in tank battles against 88s were horrific. A penetrating hit from an 88 would send molten metal spraying through the crew compartment, igniting ammunition and fuel. Tankers who survived told stories of watching their friends burn alive, trapped in disabled Shermans while German guns fired again and again. American tank commanders begged for better armor. They studied knocked-out Shermans, measuring penetration points, calculating angles, documenting exactly how the 88 was killing them. Reports flooded back to Army Ordnance Department. The data was undeniable. The Sherman's armor was inadequate against German anti-tank guns, particularly the 88. Something had to change. But the Sherman production line was running at full capacity. Redesigning the tank would take years. America needed a solution immediately. That solution became the M4A3E2 assault tank, nicknamed the Jumbo. The Jumbo wasn't a new tank. It was a standard M4A3 Sherman with one critical modification: massively increased armor. Engineers at the Grand Blanc Tank Arsenal in Michigan took the basic Sherman chassis and began adding steel. The front glacis went from 3 inches to 7 inches, the turret front went from 3 inches to 7 inches, side armor increased from 1.5 inches to 3 inches, the gun mantlet, already the thickest part of a Sherman, became an incredible 9 inches of cast steel. The resulting tank weighed 42 tons, nearly 10 tons heavier than a standard Sherman, but still mobile enough for combat operations. The specifications were impressive on paper, but the real question was practical. Could this armor actually stop an 88? American engineers constructed the first prototype in May 1944, right as D-Day landings were happening in Normandy. They couldn't wait months for field testing. They needed to know immediately if the concept worked. So they did something simple and terrifying. They parked a Jumbo prototype at Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland and shot it with captured German 88mm guns at combat ranges. The results exceeded expectations. At 800 meters typical combat range, the 88 could not penetrate the Jumbo's frontal armor. The shells either bounced off or shattered on impact. Testing continued with German Panther 75mm guns, Tiger 88mm guns, and every other anti-tank weapon in the German arsenal. The Jumbo's armor defeated them all at normal combat ranges. Only at point-blank range under 200 meters could an 88 reliably penetrate the frontal armor. And even then, the extreme thickness meant that penetrating shells lost much of their energy, reducing the catastrophic internal damage that made the 88 so lethal against standard Shermans. The Jumbo prototype had proven the concept. Now they needed to build them fast.
Production began in June 1944. The Army wanted thousands. They got 254. That's not a typo. Only 254 Jumbos were ever built. Production ended in July 1944, barely a month after it started. Why? Because the Jumbo required so much additional steel and specialized manufacturing that it was slowing down standard Sherman production. Army logistics calculated that they could build 3 regular Shermans for the resources needed for 1 Jumbo. High command made a brutal calculation. Better to have 3 tanks that could be killed than 1 tank that couldn't. So Jumbo production stopped, and the 254 examples built became some of the most sought-after vehicles in the European theater. The first Jumbos reached combat units in France in September 1944. They were distributed to armored divisions as specialized assault tanks, intended to lead attacks against fortified positions and break through German defensive lines. Tank crews who received Jumbos treated them like gifts from heaven. These were tankers who had survived battles in regular Shermans, who had seen friends burn, who had learned to fear the sound of an 88 firing. Now they had armor that could take the hit and keep fighting. The psychological impact on American tankers was immediate. Confidence surged. Tactics became more aggressive. The psychological impact on German gun crews was the opposite, pure terror. The first engagements between Jumbos and 88s happened in the Lorraine region of France in late September 1944. German defensive positions included numerous 88mm guns positioned to cover approach routes. These guns had been slaughtering regular Shermans for weeks. Then the Jumbos arrived. A company of American tanks attacked a defending village. The lead tanks were Jumbos. German 88 crews opened fire at 1,000 meters, expecting the standard result, burning American tanks. The Jumbos kept advancing, returning fire with their 75mm guns. Instead, they watched their shells bounce off. Unteroffizier Hans Becker, an 88-gun commander who survived the war, described the experience in a post-war interview. "We could not believe our eyes. We hit the American tank 3 times. Clear hits on the front, and nothing happened. The tank did not stop. It did not burn. It did not even seem damaged. We hit it 2 more times. Still, nothing. My crew was panicking. They were asking, 'What kind of tank is this?' I had no answer. I ordered them to abandon the gun. We ran."
This scene repeated across the front as more Jumbos entered combat. German intelligence desperately tried to understand what they were facing. Captured German documents from late 1944 include frantic reports about new heavy American tanks that were impervious to all anti-tank weapons. German commanders issued directives to gun crews: aim for the sides, aim for the tracks, do not engage from the front. But in the chaos of combat, gun crews didn't always have the luxury of choosing their angle. Many faced Jumbos head-on, and many learned the hard way that their 88s had finally met their match. The Battle of the Bulge in December 1944 provided the ultimate test for the Jumbo. Germany's last major offensive in the West threw everything they had at American lines, including Tiger tanks, Panther tanks, and hundreds of 88mm anti-tank guns. Several American armored units defending critical positions had Jumbos, and those Jumbos became anchors of the defense. At Bastogne, at St. Vith, at dozens of smaller engagements, Jumbos held positions that regular Shermans would have been forced to abandon. Sergeant Lafayette Poole, one of America's top tank aces, commanded a Jumbo during the Bulge. His tank, nicknamed In the Mood, became legendary for surviving hits that would have destroyed any other Sherman. German after-action reports mention Poole's tank specifically, describing how multiple guns fired on it without effect. Poole used the Jumbo's armor aggressively, deliberately drawing German fire to locate enemy positions while other American tanks maneuvered for flank shots. This tactic, impossible with regular Shermans, turned the Jumbo into both shield and bait. The terror German gun crews felt wasn't just about invulnerability. It was about the psychological reversal. For 3 years, German anti-tank crews had enjoyed technological superiority. They could kill Allied tanks before Allied tanks could effectively return fire. The 88's range and penetration power meant German crews operated with confidence. They were hunters. Allied tankers were prey. The Jumbo reversed this relationship. Suddenly, German gun crews were the vulnerable ones. A Jumbo could absorb their best shots and destroy their positions with return fire. The hunters had become the hunted. German attempts to counter the Jumbo revealed their desperation. Field modifications to existing 88s tried to increase muzzle velocity and penetration power. Special tungsten core ammunition was issued specifically for engaging heavy American tanks. German intelligence officers interrogated captured American tankers, trying to learn the Jumbo's weaknesses. They discovered a few. The side and rear armor, while improved, was still vulnerable.
The 75mm gun, while adequate, was the same weapon as standard Shermans and couldn't penetrate heavy German armor at range. And there weren't many Jumbos, only 254 in the entire theater.
This last point became crucial. Because Jumbos were so rare, German forces couldn't reliably predict where they would appear. Every American tank attack carried the uncertainty. Would this be regular Shermans we can destroy, or Jumbos that will destroy us? This uncertainty eroded German tactical confidence. Gun crews who had operated with aggressive boldness became cautious, waiting to identify targets before firing, wasting precious seconds. That hesitation gave American tankers, even those in regular Shermans, slight advantages that accumulated into better survival rates across the theater. The Jumbo's success demonstrated something American military planners had suspected. Armor thickness mattered more than sophisticated design in tank warfare. German Panthers and Tigers were engineering marvels with sloped armor, excellent guns, and advanced optics. But they were complex, expensive, and difficult to produce and maintain. The Jumbo was a brute force solution, a simple tank wrapped in ridiculous amounts of steel. Yet in combat, the simple solution worked. Jumbos had lower breakdown rates than Panthers, required less maintenance than Tigers, and could be repaired with standard Sherman parts except for the armor plates themselves. The maintenance advantage compounded over time. German heavy tanks spent significant time in repair. American Jumbos, built on the proven Sherman chassis with its reliable engine and transmission, stayed operational. Availability rates for Jumbos exceeded 85%, meaning most Jumbos were combat-ready most of the time. German Tiger availability rates often dropped below 50%. A Tiger might have thicker armor and a bigger gun than a Jumbo, but if the Tiger was in the repair depot when the battle happened, the Jumbo won by default. German tankers who faced Jumbos developed grudging respect for the design. Otto Carius, a German tank ace who commanded Tigers, wrote in his memoirs about encountering Jumbos in Germany in 1945. The Americans had learned. They took their adequate tank and made it excellent by the simple expedient of adding more armor. We Germans had tried to make our tanks perfect through clever engineering. But perfection is the enemy of good enough when good enough arrives in greater numbers and actually works. The combat record of Jumbos was impressive. Of the 254 built, fewer than 20 were destroyed by German fire during the war. Most Jumbo losses came from mechanical breakdowns, mines, or deliberate American demolition to prevent capture. The survival rate exceeded 90%, astronomical compared to the roughly 60% survival rate of standard Shermans. Crews assigned to Jumbos had significantly better survival rates than crews in other tanks. The thick armor saved countless American lives. After major battles, American intelligence teams would inspect knocked-out German anti-tank positions and interview captured gun crews. A consistent pattern emerged in these interrogations. German crews reported panic and confusion when engaging Jumbos. Many described firing multiple shots, seeing hits, seeing no effect, and experiencing a moment of psychological breakdown where they questioned whether their weapons worked at all. That moment of doubt, often lasting just seconds, was enough for American forces to close the distance or destroy the gun position. The Jumbo also had an indirect effect on German tactics. As reports of heavy American tanks spread through German units, commanders began hoarding their limited supplies of tungsten core anti-tank ammunition, holding it in reserve for encounters with heavy tanks. This meant that regular Shermans sometimes faced German guns loaded with standard ammunition that was being conserved, rather than the more lethal tungsten rounds. The mere existence of Jumbos, even when they weren't present, was affecting German ammunition management decisions in ways that benefited all American armor. The 7-inch frontal armor plate became the stuff of legend among American tankers. Crews would paint kill rings on their barrels, but Jumbo crews would also paint marks representing how many hits their armor had absorbed. Some Jumbos bore dozens of impact scars, testament to encounters where German guns had fired repeatedly without effect. These scarred Jumbos became morale symbols for entire divisions. If that tank could survive, maybe they all could. Technical analysis after the war revealed just how effective the Jumbo's armor design was. The 7-inch frontal plate, combined with the Sherman's existing 56-degree slope, created an effective armor thickness of over 11 inches against directly oncoming fire. This exceeded the frontal armor of German Panther tanks and approached the protection level of Tiger is. But while Panthers and Tigers weighed 45 and 57 tons respectively, the Jumbo achieved comparable frontal protection at 42 tons, making it more mobile and mechanically reliable than either German design.
The gun mantlet deserves special attention. At 9 inches of cast steel, it was the single thickest armor component on any medium tank in World War II. German shells hitting the mantlet didn't just fail to penetrate, they often shattered completely, sending fragments back toward the firing position. Several German gun crews were wounded by fragments of their own shells bouncing back from jumbo mantlets. This added another psychological dimension. The jumbo could hurt you with your own ammunition. American tankers developed specific tactics for jumbos. Because they knew German crews feared the frontal armor, jumbo commanders would deliberately position their tank's hull down, exposing only the turret and mantlet, forcing German gunners to shoot at the thickest armor while regular Shermans maneuvered for flank shots. This jumbo as anchor tactic appeared in multiple American Armored Division tactical manuals by early 1945. The rare jumbo had become a force multiplier for entire tank companies. The ending of jumbo production in July 1944 remains controversial among military historians. Some argue that building thousands of jumbos would have saved countless American tanker lives. Others maintain that the production trade-off was correct. 3 regular Shermans provided more tactical flexibility than 1 jumbo. What's undeniable is that the 254 jumbos built had an impact far beyond their numbers. They proved that American industry could create specialized, survivable armor when needed. They demonstrated that overwhelming an enemy's anti-tank capability was possible through engineering rather than just numbers. And they gave American tankers hope that they didn't have to die in inadequate armor. The captured German documents from late 1944 and early 1945 reveal the jumbo's psychological impact on German military effectiveness. Intelligence summaries describe declining morale among anti-tank crews, increasing reluctance to engage American armor, and spreading fear that new American wonder weapons were making German defensive doctrine obsolete.
While the jumbo was hardly a wonder weapon, just a very thick-skinned Sherman, the German perception mattered as much as the reality. An 88 crew that hesitated before firing, that doubted their weapon's effectiveness, that prepared to run rather than fight, was a crew that had already lost the psychological battle. By March 1945, as Allied forces pushed into Germany itself, the few remaining operational jumbos had become prized possessions. Divisions that had them guarded them carefully, using them only for critical assaults where their armor advantage justified the risk. Some jumbos accumulated combat records spanning from France to Germany, surviving hundreds of miles of combat operations and dozens of engagements. They became symbols of American industrial problem solving. Identify the weakness, engineer a solution, build it, win. The ultimate testament to the jumbo's effectiveness came from an unexpected source. After Germany's surrender, Allied forces discovered German tank design documents from early 1945. Among them were proposals for a Panzer IV Othep-J Bosca Jumbo, a planned German tank that would add massive applique armor to the standard Panzer IV, Germany's most common tank. The design was a direct copy of the jumbo concept. Take an existing proven chassis and add enough armor to defeat enemy anti-tank guns. Germany never built this tank. They lacked the resources by 1945, but the fact that they planned it proves they recognized the jumbo's brilliance. The Germans were trying to copy the American solution to a problem German guns had created. In the end, the M4A3E2 Jumbo represented a uniquely American approach to warfare. It wasn't elegant, it wasn't sophisticated, it was just a standard tank wrapped in outrageous amounts of steel. But it worked, it saved lives, it terrified the enemy. And it proved that sometimes the best response to a technological challenge isn't clever engineering, but overwhelming force. The Germans had built the legendary 88, a masterpiece of anti-tank warfare that had dominated battlefields for years. America's answer was simple. Build armor the 88 couldn't penetrate. 7 inches of steel. No clever angles, no advanced metallurgy, just more steel than the 88 could handle. And when German gun crews discovered they couldn't kill the jumbo, when they watched their shells bounce harmlessly away, when they realized the Americans had neutralized their best weapon through sheer industrial brute force, they understood something terrifying. They were no longer facing soldiers. They were facing an industrial nation that could solve any battlefield problem by building more of whatever was needed. More armor, more tanks, more guns, more steel. The jumbo was just one example. And if America could do this with tanks, what else could they do? That question haunted German commanders until the final surrender, and it started with 254 Shermans wrapped in 7 inches of armor that made the mighty 88 obsolete.